Yo, what is up, Wizheads? It's Blake here, bringing you guys a gear and deck setup video. A lot of you guys have been asking for this, and I've been meaning to make it, but didn't have the time, so here we go. Let's get into the gear first. I'll show you guys my stats, all that, my pet, what I like to use, and then I'll go over the deck and show you guys what I got. So my stats, I got 112 damage, you know, pretty good resist. It's kind of low for ice, but it's good enough for what I do, because I play pretty aggressively for an ice. 24 accuracy, which is really low. I wish I had more, but you can't get more than that. 48 crit, which is really high. Nice, because it's pretty much every other hit you're critting, which is really good. No block at all, which doesn't really matter, because I mean, you're not going to block anyway. I'll show you guys a setup where you can use a different wand that gives you a little bit of block, but it doesn't give you that much at all. Then 33 pierce, which is pretty solid. Perfect pips, 5% boost. The standard stuff. So let me show you guys what I'm rocking. I got the croc hat. Definitely need this. There's no other hat that you can use. You just got to farm the duel. Same with the robe. Got the bone smasher robe of cold. You get this one from Rattlebones. You definitely need these two. For the boots, I use Lydia's frozen foot wraps. This is from the Professor Horde pack. Definitely get these ones, because the only other boots that are somewhat okay are the Parisian Greaves, but with those you can fail pip, you lose accuracy, you lose a bunch of crit, so it's just not worth it overall. For the wand, there's two different wands you can use. You can use this one, which is the Sinbad one, or this one, which comes from the Immortal Lore pack. I've used both of them a good bit, and I have to say that my preference is probably the Sinbad one, and it's just because of that extra damage. Damage is king, especially since most of the time you're hitting with either Infal Up or Strike. You really don't need that extra pierce. It is helpful, but the 6 extra damage is so much better. But the other wand, the Aquiline Secular Lance, the good things about that is it gives you a ton of block. Your block goes up to, yeah, 13%, which is pretty solid. It does save you a lot, but I noticed that having the extra 6 damage saved me more than the 13% block did, so that's why I used that one. Another good thing about it is that you get 6 shadow 1-hits, which is nice because you don't want any ice 1-hits, obviously, because you're blade stacking. So with this one you can add more. I only use 3 1-hits in my deck anyway, but sometimes, you know, if you want to add a 4th one or even more depending on your playstyle, you can always go with that. And the mage cast really doesn't matter, so I would definitely recommend the Sinbad one, but both of these are really solid ones that you can use. For the Thame, definitely use the Darkmoor Thame. There's no other thing you should use. I actually bought the Duelist one to give me that extra crit to see what happened, but I'll show you real quick. It really doesn't give you that much of a boost. It's like 7%, I think, or 9%. Yeah, so you go from 48 to 57, but in exchange for that, you lose a bunch of other stats. You lose 2 damage, 2 accuracy, you lose 7 pips, and that's huge, which means even if you're using the rock mount, you're still gonna have a failed pip, so it's really not worth it. I would recommend the Duelist Thame for like exalted balance if you're going for like a crit set or like crit life or something, but otherwise you should always be using the Darkmoor Thame. It's just a lot better. For the amulet of Neverword, I mean, it's the only amulet you want to use. You get this one from Shane. You just gotta farm it. It's a pain in the ass to get, but you gotta do it if you want the right stats. For the ring, there's no other choice. You really want the Duelist Daredevil ring. This ring is so good. Same ring that all maxes use pretty much, just because it gives the pierce, good pips, good damage. I mean, it's really solid all around, so you definitely want that. What I would recommend is using Alpha and Omega if you don't have that, but only while you're doing tours until you get the Daredevil ring, because you really need that extra 6 pierce. It makes such a huge difference. So I would not do ranked until you get the Duelist ring. For the mount, I'm using the Ice Sculpture, but it really doesn't matter, you know, like don't sweat if you don't have it. I was just lucky that I had it when I was trying to go for the Fire Gulcher, so yeah, that's what I use. And you don't need the rock with this setup because you already have perfect pips. Oh, this is because I forgot to switch the thing, but yeah, you have perfect pips even without the rock, so it's really unnecessary for the setup. And then for the deck, you have this one, which is the crafted one from Darkmoor, and this one's a bit of a pain to get. It really depends how many characters you have and how much you farmed the exalted duels and the random stuff that gives you the motes. I strongly recommend, if you have a character that already has your fishing leveled up, go do the fishing on that character, get the 2 fish, and then transfer it with an aquarium. A lot of people don't know you can do that. You just have to put the fish in an aquarium, and then you put it in your shared bank, and when you pull it out on your other character, it'll just be there waiting for you. So that was huge. So yeah, that's the gear I use. Now I'm gonna show you guys my pets. So for the pets, I use, this is the main one that I've been using recently, but I also use this pet. These are like my 2 go-to pets, and I know a lot of people are thinking like, yo Blake, why aren't you using Ward Pet? The reason for that is because I face pretty much every school, so that's why I like to have a universal pet as opposed to a ward pet, because if you're using a ward pet, yeah, it's gonna help when you're facing a matchup that you have ward for, but you're still missing out on so much damage. It really makes a big difference having that extra damage. So between these 2 pets, I would definitely recommend going with an armament pet, but the Shiver Knight is also really good because it just saves deck space. If you find that your deck is too cluttered or you're not being able to pull what you want, you should maybe try getting a Shiv Knight, because with using this, you can blade stack those blades, but you don't have to pack extra sharpens. So it does make a difference. The downside obviously is that it's a 40 blade instead of a 50 blade with sharpen, and it does make a decent difference. So it's really up to personal preference, but both these pets are really good, and they're definitely the best ice pets right now. So to get into the stats, I would honestly, both of these are really nice, but I prefer Infal on my pet, at least right now. I'm still testing both of them, but I prefer Infal because one, my accuracy is so shit anyways that having the extra accuracy while Infal is up makes a big difference, especially if they're mantling or doing some weird stuff. Does help out. And also it's nice because sometimes you're going against somebody who knows what they're doing, and even if you're first, you can't afford to get rid of a Shadow Pip going into strike. Sometimes if you have that Infal up, you need to go for the Open Weaver, you know? So I really like having Infal, and it does cast slightly more than Fortify. Fortify still spams, but yeah, I prefer to have Infal, definitely. But Fortify is also really good. I remember when I made this pet, people were saying that I was like so mental, like why do you have Fortify on your pet if you're also using Brace? And I get it, I get why people might think that's weird, but something a lot of people don't know is that the cast rates of anything on your pet are independent of one another, which means the chance of Fortify casting at any round while no aura is up is completely independent of the chance of Brace casting while there is no aura up. So they basically don't affect each other. So yeah, having Fortify and Brace on your pet is actually really good, and it just means that you have a higher chance of an aura being cast. It doesn't affect which one's going to be cast because you have two of them on your pet. So this is a really good defensive pet. If I'm feeling like I need to play more defensively, then I would probably use this one over the Infal pet. And if I want to play more aggressively, or I'm tired of fizzling mantles, then I'll put the Infal pet. And I fizzle basically every mantle, so that's why I like having the Infal pet. And also it's nice to have the arm because then you can pack regular sharpen and pet sharpen and stack the 50 blades. So yeah, it's really up to personal preference, but I would strongly recommend using a universal pet for exalted PvP, because even if you're really high rank, you're not going to be facing a lot of the same schools. Most of the time you still face a good amount of all the schools. So even if you have like Fire Ward and it helps you against the fire, the next game you might go up against a death, and if you had an extra 6 damage or 12 damage or whatever based on what you're rocking on your pet, you might have been able to kill them. So that's why I like having universal pet. Ward pet is still good, and if you are going to use a ward pet, I would definitely recommend Fire Ward the most. Other than that, Ice Ward is good too, and Death Ward. But yeah, I would go with a universal pet. Don't think that Fortify and Brace together is mental, or that Infal and Brace together is mental. They both spam and they're independent of one another, so it's actually really nice to have that extra talent with Brace. But don't trip if you don't have the Brace jewel. It's totally fine just having Fortify or Infal. So yeah, let me show you guys my deck now. So this is the deck that I'm using right now, but I'm always tweaking it a little bit, and you know, there's no such thing as a perfect deck, so don't think like, oh, this deck's gonna work for me. It really depends on your playstyle and what rank you are and the kind of opponents you're facing. So a lot of the times if I'm like, okay, I'm pulling way too many like myth shields and I'm not facing any myths, I might take one out, or I might add another set shield if I feel like I'm not pulling one of them enough. This deck that I'm using right now may not be the deck that I use in a week or 2 weeks or even tomorrow, but it's definitely the same base that I use, and you know, I always just tweak it a little bit depending on how I'm feeling. So I have 5 bubbles in. 5's a pretty good amount. I would recommend like 4 to 6 depending on how big or small your deck is. 6 blades. The reason why I keep only 6 blades, I would actually pack more in my main, but I pack 6 in my side, so 6 has worked pretty good for me. I keep 3 regular sharpens and 3 pet sharpens. The reason for that, why I carry so many, is because you really want to be able to pull the sharpens and enchant on your blade. Ideally, you never want to just do a regular 40 blade. You want to always be doing at least a 50 blade or a 45 TC blade. It's your only move. It's totally fine to put a 40 blade, but you're trying to get as much damage as possible, so the 50 really helps. I keep 1 of every dispel in except for Storm and Balance. The reason for that is that Storm, the only time really that it's going to help you to dispel them is if they're going to Scion or if they're going to Shadow hit. I've noticed that having a Storm dispel, usually I don't pull it in time anyway because Storm is so aggressive, and also with the new turn-based meta coming, dispels are still going to be good, but not as good as they were before, at least from, you know, if you're first dispelling a hit. And then I don't carry Balance Dispel because, yeah, Balance Dispel is helpful, but a lot of the times they're not going to hit you with anything bigger in pips than Mana Burn. It does help, but it's not a huge difference, so I just keep them both out. I haven't really needed them or lost the game because I felt if I had it in, I'd be better off. Keep 2 Steel Wards in. Steel Ward is very good, but it's very situational. You don't really want to just Steel Ward a tower or something like that. You know, I mean, obviously you can, but it's very situational when it's a good move to Steel Ward. But Steel Ward's a very powerful card, so I would recommend like 1 to 3 of them in your deck. Stun blocks, I keep 6 of them in, and you definitely want to have a ton of stun blocks. No matter what school, what level you are, you want to have a lot of stun blocks in your main deck. And the reason for that is because you want to stun block ideally turn 1 almost every single game. So to have a lot of them in your deck means that you have a high chance of pulling it on turn 1, which means that turn 1 you can spend just putting up your stun block and discarding all the extra clutter that's in your hand. You can discard, 3 to 5 cards or even your entire hand if you want to be able to pull more stuff for the next round. So it's really important to have a bunch of them in your deck so you can pull it pretty quickly. For set shields, right now I have 2 of every set shield from the 6 schools except for balance, obviously. I have 2 from each one of them for a total of 4 set shields for each school. This, like I said, I tweak all the time depending on how I notice, if I'm playing a lot of deaths in Q one day, I might add more death. If I'm not facing that many mits, I might take that out. If I need more ice and fire, I'll add more of those. So it really depends on what rank you are and what you've noticed in Q more. So, don't take this for granted, and it also works with the amount of cards I have in my deck. If I had more cards in my deck, I'd probably add more set shields to have a good ratio of what you can pull. But yeah, it's really up to personal preference, what rank you are, school you are, all that stuff. As for utility cards, I got 3 of these in. So I have 2 Green Oaks in, which is really good. Green Oak's just a great card in general. I think a lot of people misuse Green Oak, like they'll use it incorrectly when it's not a good time. And I've done that before too. If you use it correctly, it's a huge card. Take off a shield, give them a weakness, give you a blade, all in one turn. And the value that creates, even if you're losing 3 power pips, is massive. And I recently added one of these, Shift Grendel, to my deck. I didn't like it at first just because most people don't tower shield. A lot of people will set shield, so it's like a bit useless. But sometimes when they are spamming tower shields or they do have one up and you need them to have a mantle on, or it's just a good play in general to have that dot on, it's useful to have. So I recently put 1 in there, but you can put 1 to 2 depending on how much you use it. And then I keep 5 strikes in because that's just a solid amount to have. You definitely want to have, at least if you're a school that has a good amount of cards in your deck, you want to have about 4 to 5 strikes is a good amount. If you're playing very aggressively and your deck is super small, you can probably get away with like 2, 3, but in general I would say 4 to 5 is a good amount to have. And then I keep 3 regular wand hits in my deck, but you can really change this depending on type of schools that you're fighting. But most of the time I notice that 3 wand hits is enough for me. Don't pack a shadow shield because I haven't faced any Nova on my ice yet, and also ice is just really bad against Nova. If they're a good Nova, they have make cast and feeble on their pet and they're ready, I mean there's really not much you can do, because when you start blading they just get rid of your blade, and if you try to do any damage onto them they can just out heal you with a veiling and they'll get you faster than you can get to them, especially at being exalted. So I keep it out because you really want to reduce clutter in your deck. Ideally you want your deck to be as small as possible. That doesn't mean to just take out a bunch of cards and make it super tiny for no reason, but you got to think carefully about each card that's in your deck and the ratio of how you're going to pull things. Because if you have too many cards in your deck, like let's say this was full, you're going to have a much smaller chance of pulling what you need. And I always hear people complaining about like, oh, my deck failed. Yeah, deck fails do happen, but a lot of it is also how you make your deck. So you should really take that into consideration when you're making your deck. So let me show you my side now. So this is what I use for my side deck. Again, like my main deck, I'm always tweaking it depending on what I feel is important, or what I'm facing, or if I'm not pulling something enough. Sometimes I'll throw in a Banshee, or I'll throw in Dark Pack. Sometimes I'll throw in an extra Ice Bird. There's really just random things where I'll take a Blade out or something, or a Frostbite. So you really have to tweak it, but this is the base that I use. So let me go over everything. I keep 1 Arcticzilla in, and I do base fizz Arcticzilla, and I swear I fizz it like more times than I power it. The reason why I use Arcticzilla over like an Enchanted Wyvern is because most of the time you don't really need to use a 4-pip hit that's just a regular 4-pip no shadow hit unless it's your only move, and at that point you really want as much damage as possible. And Azilla has won me probably about 5-6 games because they didn't expect me to hit, you know what I mean? Like you might be in Shrike, they mana burn you, and I blade into an Arcticzilla and they weren't expecting you to hit because you didn't have enough pips for a Weaver or a Winter Moon or something like that, or a Frostbite. So since Ice has a lot of 5-pick big hits and you don't have the 4-pip Shad at Exalted, Zilla is really good, and most of the time they won't expect it. So that's why I keep it in my deck. And also with the Infal pet, if I do have Infal up with no mantle or anything, then it's 100% powered. I keep 2 stuns. Both of these are accuracy enchanted for 100%. I would definitely recommend putting at least 2 in your side deck and not packing any in your main, because if you do pack it in your main, you have a chance of fizzling, and if you do fizzle, you just wasted a turn. So you definitely want to keep it in your side if you can. I have 5 frostbites in, which is a lot of frostbites. I usually run 4, but I've been running 5 recently, and the reason for that is because in general, when you're pulling into your side, all you're gonna pull at first is either a blade or a tower, and then you're gonna be looking for your first hit, which is usually gonna be frostbite, sometimes iceberg, but it's usually gonna be frostbite. So I want to be able to pull exactly what I need as soon as possible so that I don't have to dig too much. So having 5 of them in might seem like a lot and a little bit extra, but because it's usually the first hit that you do, I want to be pulling it quickly. I have 6 blades in my side deck. Again, it's just because let's say you don't have a good turn, you might want to dig into your side and pull out an ice blade. So that's why I have 6 of them in. I would definitely recommend keeping some TC blades in your side as an ice. Lord of Winter, I keep 2 of them in, and 2 of them is a bit low. Sometimes I run 3, but like I said, it's really about making sure your deck's as small as possible, even the side. Obviously, you want to be prepared for everything. You also want to reduce clutter and make it easy to pull what you need. So even though Lord of Winter is an amazing card, it's usually something where I'm either pulling for it in advance, or when I pull it and I have it in my hand, I think about my next few moves and I figure out whether I need to use it or not. I haven't really noticed a time where I've run 2 of them and I'm like, wow, if I had Lord of Winter in my hand, you know, I could have won the game. So I've noticed that 2 is enough. Snow Angel, I keep 1 in, and this is really just if you blade stack and want to go for a lot of damage with a dot. Sometimes I take it out because, you know, frostbite's pretty decent too, but again, like I said, damage is king, and having that extra 170 damage or whatever, 180 damage with a dot over time, it just makes a huge difference. So that's why I keep 1 of them in. I keep 2 cold irons because I do face a lot of storms and a lot of fires. Sometimes I'll take 1 out and I'll just run 1 of them, but it really depends on how often you're pulling it and how often you need it. I'm always tweaking it no matter what. Same with the icebergs. I keep 3 of these in right now, but sometimes I'll keep 4 of them. It really just depends on if you need it and if you're pulling it as much as you want. Another thing I wanted to say is that a lot of people don't understand that there is no such thing as a perfect deck because everybody plays differently. What might work really well for me may not work for you at all. Like, you might try this deck out and be like, Blake, you're out of your mind, this deck sucks. It really depends how you play the deck. So it's good to, you know, look at other people and see what they use in their deck, but at the end of the day, you should really be, you know, tweaking your deck and making it how it works for you, because some people like to cycle a lot and some people don't. Me personally, I love to cycle. I'm always like discarding my hand and pulling for stuff. That's just the way that I play, and I find it works best for pulling what you need. But some people like to keep their hand, you know, they might just get rid of 1 card or not even get rid of a single card. For me personally, I cycle a lot and this works best for me. So yeah, I keep 5 towers in here just because sometimes you need to tower if you don't find a set shield, but ideally you never want to tower unless you're up against a storm or a balance, obviously, and that's because balance is balance and storm can insane bolt you. But otherwise, you really want to always be set shielding because that extra 20 resist makes a big difference. Another thing I wanted to say is I only keep 3 icebergs, but sometimes I'll pack in a snow shark or an ice elf or something like that just to take care of minions if I see people are spamming minions recently. But I've noticed that also snow shark has base fizz, same with ice elf, so it's pretty unreliable, which I don't like. So I've just been rocking 3 icebergs and that's been working for me, but you can tweak that. Some people like to add more. Since you can't add no serpent anymore and I made this character after it got patched, I only use iceberg. Then I keep 2 winter moons. I kept 3 winter moons in when I was ranking up at first because nobody stun blocked. Like, literally nobody stun blocked. Every game it was just like play conservatively, blade into shrike, frostbite, winter moon, a bomb. Like, literally every single game was like that almost. But I noticed now the people that I'm facing are a lot better and everybody stun blocks, you know, turn 1, turn 2 most of the time. There are games still where people don't stun block and I dig for my winter moon, so sometimes I want to add a 3rd one in, but 2 to 3 winter moons will do the trick just fine. I keep 4 weavers in because you really don't need more than that. I know it's like your main big hit, but you really don't need more than 4 weavers. You know, you can always discard, pull another one. The most I think I've ever weavered in a match was like 3 times, so you really don't need more than 4. As for utility, I keep these 3 cards with me. The reason for that is you always want to have at least 1 triage in your side. Definitely want to have something to do with dots, and I like to have 1 triage and 1 shift because sometimes people would blade stack into king art or like a bone dragon, right? And if you're first, it really helps to be able to shift it over. I've won several games like that where I was first. I knew I was going up against a school that was just gonna blade stack dot me, and I waited to pull shift, played defensively, and then as soon as they hit me with it, I shifted. So if you don't have shift, you can just run 2 triages, but I definitely recommend having at least 2 on your side, if not at least 1 at the bare minimum. And then I keep a 60 mantle in. I only put this in recently, and that's because I've noticed the stat difference is so big at my rank. When I'm facing a good max level fire from like 2nd, for example, it's really like near impossible to win if they know what they're doing because the stat difference is too high. Like, I have 500 more health, but they have so much more pierce damage. They can just destroy you. So sometimes from second, your only option is to go for like a dot into the mantle. So sometimes like you really have to bank on RNG. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep it in. But yeah, this is the base that I use for my sides. Like I said, I'm always tweaking it. Sometimes, you know, I'll take this out. I'll take Snow Angel out to make it smaller if I find that I'm not pulling what I need, you know. But it really depends on who you're going up against and how you cycle your deck and the sides as well. I think that's pretty much everything. A lot of people ask me, why am I level 101 and not 102 like most people that do Exalted? So the reason for it being 102 for most people is that you need that extra Shadow Pip slot. That's huge. You should never do Exalted PvP with just a 1. You need to have that second one. It's really important. You have to do pretty much all of Chrysalis except the last zone. I think the Hive pretty much to get there. But yeah, the reason why I'm level 101 is because there's this dungeon called the Beast that gives you a ton of XP, but I poured it out, let another person do the dungeon basically until it was time to turn in the quest in the dungeon, and then I poured it back in to get that XP, because otherwise the Beast gives like 500k XP or something crazy like that. So I only got the XP at the end, which made me a much lower level. And also I didn't do all of the training point quests and Winter Tusk. I have not finished Winter Tusk on this character either, so that's why I'm so low level. And the reason for that is obviously for ranked. How you get placed against other people is dependent on your rank and your level. So being as low level as possible will help you get easier opponents at your rank for max level. So yeah, those are my stats and everything. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know I wasn't like super hyped or anything. I'm just really tired. I've been feeling kind of sick, but I'm gonna record more videos today and gonna post a fire PvP video on Saturday and then probably some ice PvP on Monday. Not quite sure yet, but yeah, I'll keep you guys posted. I want to say thanks again for the support, and if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Stay tuned. Have a good one. Peace out.